The Seahawks turned in a dominant defensive performance in the first game of the Mike Macdonald era. At the center of that dominance, a safety group that maybe isn't getting enough attention in Mike Macdonald's defense. We're going to be diving into what Julian Love called the tip of the spear for Seattle's defense coming up next year on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined here on our Tuesday episode by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there, whether you're tuning in nearby North Bend, Washington, or over in Annapolis, Maryland. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks now going to be turning the page today, being their typical Tuesday off day, turning the page to week 2, and the 1-0 New England Patriots. We're going to take a first look at the Patriots. But before we get to that, we've got our final takeaways, our Tell the Truth Tuesday takeaways coming out of Sunday's win over the Denver Broncos. Jam-packed episode. Let's get underway. Now for your lead story here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. The Seahawks did a phenomenal job containing the Denver Broncos offense, at least for most of the game on Sunday. Bo Nix threw the ball 42 times in his first career start and didn't even get to 140 passing yards. The Broncos didn't get to 100 rushing yards in the game either. Plenty to work on, but a really good stepping stone for Mike Macdonald's defense and an exciting first impression of what that scheme is going to look like with the personnel that the Seahawks have built onto this roster. But Rob, there's all this talk about the defensive line, the cornerback groups, what are the linebackers going to look like? And at the end of the day, when you looked at the Baltimore Ravens the last 2 years, maybe the most important position group for the Baltimore Ravens was their safety position with Kyle Hamilton and company. And I don't know that any group was more impactful as a whole than the safety group was for the Seahawks on Sunday. When you're talking about a group led by Julian Love that has to take a lot of communication responsibilities, plays a lot of different positions on the field, has to know what other players are doing. This is a very difficult position to play in this defense, and yet the safeties really were the stars that shined brightest for the Seahawks on Sunday afternoon.
Well, they certainly shine brightly. There's no question about that, Corbin. I mean, I thought that the way that Seattle implemented the three safety looks, and the fact that you had an interception at the safety position, of course, with Julian Love. You also had steady tackling from the others in that group. And I think some of it was the fact that the Seahawks were facing a rookie quarterback in Bo Nix. And, there's no question about it. I mean, the types of passes that he was asked to make were mostly short dump-offs. But it was the physicality that we saw from Seattle safeties, the fact that they were not ever, it seemed like, caught out of position. That to me is one of the most encouraging things. And we talked about this a year ago when Mike Macdonald was the defensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens. Sure, as a first round selection, Kyle Hamilton was going to get all of the attention and well deserved. But at the same time, it was Geno Stone, the quote unquote other safety for the Baltimore Ravens, who actually was among the most productive pass thieves in all of the NFL a year ago. And that kind of came out of nowhere from a statistical perspective. And so that to me is one of the most encouraging things here, is that we saw big hits, we saw big plays in pass coverage. And again, we saw just the consistency in coverage that I think suggests that Seattle's safety play is going to continue to draw raves and be the tip of the spear, as Julian Love said a couple of days ago.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, because I want to play this clip from after the game, because I asked Julian Love about the play of the safeties for the Seahawks. We got to see K'Von Wallace force a fumble that was recovered by Jerome Baker. Rayshawn Jenkins was smashing guys all afternoon long. And then obviously Love himself had 12 tackles, a forced fumble, and an interception. He was the player of the game, in my opinion, on defense. Did a phenomenal job. And I asked Julian Love about that position group, and he made sure to remind us that this is not the first time that he's had a chance to rave about his teammates at that safety position group.
Yeah, obviously, like I told you guys months ago that I'm excited about this room. Selfishly, the safety room, but DBs in general. I think I told the guys, like, we are the tip of the spear. The energy of this team goes with us. We have to stay consistent, stay locked in, and just let guys look to us as just a beacon of just playing football, playing Seahawks football. And yeah, K'Von, I mean, his production rate is probably sky high with the forced fumble there, and whenever he was coming in. And then Ray played a great game too. He was flying around. And that's just swagger, that's energy, and that's who we want to be.
Swagger, energy, that's who we want to be. And I'm telling you, Rob, you were in the press box with me. We got to watch this game and the way that these safeties were flying around. I can't think of a better way to describe this safety group. The way that Julian Love was coming up and smacking people. I mean, he had 4 tackles that were within 2 yards of the line of scrimmage. So it wasn't like he was making 10, 12 tackles, 15, 20 yards downfield, which was a huge problem for the Seahawks safeties last year. Not necessarily their fault, but that was the way the defense is playing. Way too many big plays. We got to see these safeties come up. K'Von Wallace literally had 1 tackle on the 12 snaps he was in, but it was a big one, punching the ball out like Charles Tillman over there and getting that forced fumble that Jerome Baker was able to recover. And Rayshawn Jenkins, he was the enforcer with his 6 tackles. And we got to see all 3 of these players. But I think that you had to look beyond the box score even to understand the impact of these guys, because Mike Macdonald put so much stress on his safeties. They have to be able to play multiple positions. And I'm not just saying free and strong safety. Rayshawn Jenkins comes up and plays linebacker sometimes. Julian Love has to do that sometimes. Sometimes he has to go in the slot. K'Von Wallace sometimes has to go in the slot. I mean, these guys have to know multiple positions, even the spots that they aren't playing. They have to know what everyone around them is doing, because they are the central nervous system of the communication for the secondary. And really, you could make an argument for the defense. The linebackers are going to have the green dot, but at the same time, Julian Love's had that responsibility before because of his high football IQ and his understanding. But we didn't see the communication breakdowns. We didn't see the coverage busts. This defense seemed to be in the right place at the right time. Pretty much every snap they were out there. And I felt like the safeties were a huge part of that, which is why I'm going to make the argument right now that for this team to reach their potential, the safety group might be the most key ingredient that maybe hasn't been talked about here. These 3 players are going to be a big part of whether or not this team competes for an NFC West title.
On the one hand, I wholeheartedly agree with you. At the same time, I think that anybody who's been paying attention, it definitely has been, kind of touting this safety group, Corbin. I mean, I really think that this is probably the most important positional group for the Seahawks and their success. But at the same time, I think that should be expected. Again, we saw the way that Kyle Hamilton and Geno Stone were so effective for the Baltimore Ravens a year ago under Mike Macdonald, of course. We saw the way that Julian Love not only came in his first year in Seattle and became a Pro Bowler, and the Seahawks rewarded him with extending his contract, and so those things were fairly expected. There were some questions, of course, about Rayshawn Jenkins and K'Von Wallace, how they might be able to fit into Seattle's defense. But I just think that when you look at the way that the NFL is trending towards more multiple receiver sets and really throwing the ball to tight ends and running backs, that just makes sense that safeties are going to be more important. And it just so happens that the Seahawks have to be just flush with talent at the safety position. And we're not even talking about a guy like a Jarek Reed, who, oh, by the way, led the Seahawks in special teams tackles a year ago, which in the past had been kind of the entry level to getting themselves onto the starting roster. Or the starting unit. So again, I think that this is a strong group, and we have talked about that in the past. I also think that it's one that is kind of being nationally slept on, to your point. So again, I think that this is a positional group that is going to be one of the strengths of the Seahawks defense. And as many issues as Seattle had, say, along their offensive line in the first half of that game, the defense really was the reason why the Seahawks were able to, kind of weather the storm initially and then wind up being able to. I know that Denver scored the late touchdown that made this game appear closer than it was, but it was the safety play that I thought was the most consistent, but with a little bit of a nod, the tip of the cap to Geno Smith, of course, the quarterback position. But otherwise, I think that the safety play was the most consistent, the most dominant of any group for the Seahawks, and the biggest reason why they are 1-0 at this point.
And they might be getting slept on, but I'll tell you this, Rob, if Julian Love keeps putting up double-digit tackle performances and intercepting passes, being a Pro Bowler last year, that's going to change. That narrative is going to change. And Rayshawn Jenkins, I mean, he had some bone-jarring hits in that game. These guys are becoming tone setters for Seattle's defense. And I think that's what Mike Macdonald was hoping for, because Julian Love, Rayshawn Jenkins, even K'Von Wallace, these guys have played a lot of football. They're veterans. You got a lot of young players in this team. They're going to be looking towards them, especially those young corners like Devin Witherspoon and Rick Woolen. So I think this is an incredibly important position group for the Seahawks on defense to really fulfill the potential that they have on that side of the ball and see where it can take them in the standings in the NFC West. When we come back, we're not quite done wrapping up Sunday's game. It's Tell the Truth Tuesday. Rob and I are going to be dishing out some words of wisdom, some final thoughts coming out of Sunday's game heading towards week 2. We'll get to that up next here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at Hims. No man wants to lose his hair. Trust me, I can tell you all about that. It's very common. And now with Hims, the solution is simple. Try Hims Hair Loss Solutions, and you'll be joining hundreds of thousands of subscribers who got their flow back. Hims provides access to a range of hair loss treatments that work all from the comfort of your couch. Hims makes treating hair loss simple with doctor-trusted treatment options and personalized chewable oral spray and serum treatment options so you can find what works best for you. The process is simple and it's 100% online. Just answer a few questions and a medical provider will determine if treatment is right for you. If prescribed, your treatment is sent directly to your door. Start yours for free online today at hims.com/lockedonnfl. That's HIMS.com/lockedonnfl for your personalized hair loss treatment options. hims.com/lockedonnfl. Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See the website for full details and important safety information. Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined as always by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you as always for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The new Locked On NFL is here. Locked On NFL is 2 shows every day now. First, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks things off in the morning with a double shot of NFL Espresso, and then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Add in the local Locked On experts, and you get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. Madman Tyler Rowland and the barber Tony Wiggins. Your second listen, make sure you're tuning in to Locked On NFL on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. We're going to tie up some loose ends now. Obviously, as Mike Macdonald said yesterday, and this is the way football works, you get to enjoy your victory for 24 hours, and then it's time to turn the page. It's time to start game planning for your next upcoming opponent. In this case, for the Seahawks, the New England Patriots, who we will start talking about when we close out the show today. An interesting team that is 1-0 right now, sitting tied at the top of the AFC East. But before that, as we do each and every Tuesday, it's time for Tell the Truth Tuesday. Some words of wisdom, our final closing thoughts, our closing takeaways coming out of Sunday's win and heading towards week 2, the first road test in Foxborough. And Rob, I'm going to start on the offensive side of the football. And what is your first Tell the Truth Tuesday wisdom to offer our listeners today?
Well, Corbin, I want to start with Stone Forsythe at the right tackle position. I talked about him a lot in yesterday's show and then in previous opportunities that he's had. And I think that it is unfortunate that sometimes people just focus in on the negative rather than, acknowledging the positive. Stone Forsythe missed some blocks. There's no question about it. At 6'9", he is going to be somebody who is occasionally going to struggle with leverage. leverage, but I also gush about the adjustments that Seattle's coaches made, specifically with Ryan Grubb and Scott Huff. And one of the things that I saw is that they asked the 6'9", 330-pound Stone Force to put his hand in the dirt, come off the ball low and hard. And that, I think, was part of the reason why that the Seahawks were as effective as they were in the second half of just running the football. And so again, to me, that is going to be one of the huge storylines that we have to watch until the Seahawks are able to get a George Fant or Abraham Lucas back at the right tackle position. I think that considering the Stone Forsythe is a sixth round draft selection, he is still an incredible athlete at his size. Again, 6'9", 330 pounds, ran a 5.02 in the 40-yard dash all those years ago when the Seahawks did select him. To me, you have to accentuate what he can do very, very well. And so I was pleasantly surprised in watching the tape of his pass protection, of his run blocking, some of Ken Walker III's best running plays, including that second rushing touchdown. They actually got called back due to an unfortunate holding call on DK Metcalf. Stone Forsythe was laying guys down. And so, again, I think that there is plenty of reason to be encouraged by the play of big number 78 and why the Seahawks should feel confident that they have a plan in place to be able to go on the road in Foxborough this week and still be able to come out with the victory.
We've talked so much the last couple days about Ryan Grubb, and I could continue doing it because I just thought the adaptations that he made in the second half were masterclass. But I want to just talk about it. And again, this is not a shot at the former coach. Anybody that has listened to this show knows how much you and I both respect Pete Carroll and view him as a future Hall of Famer. He absolutely should be a Hall of Fame coach, what he did in Seattle. But it felt like at times the last few years, especially that late in games, there were too many times where the Seahawks did not go for the jugular when they had opportunities to do it on offense. And Mike Macdonald, the comments he made yesterday about this, that 3rd and 6 play, the decision to go for it, go throw the football and go win the football game. There were just too many times where that didn't happen necessarily the last few years. Even though Geno Smith orchestrated plenty of game-winning drives, there were plenty of times where it felt like they were playing too cautious, or it'd be run, and then punt it to the other team. Mike Macdonald wasn't going to do that with a minute 40 left on the clock. He wasn't going to give Sean Payton and Bo Nix that opportunity. We are going to be aggressive. We're going to go win this football game right now. And to me, that was a breath of fresh air. Now, again, I'm not saying that Pete Carroll never did anything like that, but it did seem like there was more of a conservative approach in that regard a lot of times. And I know that frustrated fans too. We see the comments, we see what fans say after games, and we know that there was plenty of frustration about a number of games where it felt like they had chances to put them away. I'll give you a great example, that Raiders game 2 years ago that they gave up like 9 million rushing yards in that game. They still had a chance to win it late, and they got conservative. The Raiders ended up getting the ball in overtime, and then Josh Jacobs rips off a 60-plus yard touchdown run, game over. There were too many games like that. Seeing Mike Macdonald play that aggressive card there and let's go win this football game, I just thought that was a refreshing approach. So got to give him some kudos for that, getting his first victory. As far as my next takeaway here on Tell the Truth Tuesday, I'm going to be a little bit more on the pessimistic side with this one, and not necessarily taking a shot at the player, but just the opportunity for another guy to potentially play right guard in the near future. To me, coming out of this game, Anthony Bradford made some pretty good run blocks in the second half. So I'm not going to sit here and say Christian Haynes should start week 2. That is not the argument I'm making. But I think that the leash has got to be shorter on Anthony Bradford. If he is getting holding penalties, he is struggling to keep defenders in front of him in pass protection, and he is just not playing a solid all-around football. At some point quickly, you got to give Christian Haynes, your 3rd-round pick, an opportunity and see what he can do. So to me, that leash has got to be shorter coming out of this game. I understood Mike Macdonald's rationale in week 1 that, hey, I'm not going to pull a guy after one half. I'm not going to just bench a player. But I think if you get to Foxborough and Anthony Bradford has more struggles in pass protection, penalties continue to be an issue, I think at some point in this game, you got to say, you know what? Christian Haynes is one of our high draft picks. Let's go see what he can do. This is a position that they've still got to find some stability. And maybe Bradford goes out and answers the call. He did in the second half last week. But if he doesn't, I think you've got to start considering, if you're Scott Huff, hey, this is one of my incoming rookies. Let me see what Christian Haynes can do in game action in a tough road environment. To me, that leash is going to be shorter for Anthony Bradford moving forward.
Yeah, and I think that's the perfect segue to where I wanted to talk about here for a moment, because I had my reservations about the linebacker Jerome Baker and how short his leash should be, considering, of course, that he wasn't able to play in the preseason coming off of the injury. And Tyrese Knight seemed like he was playing, the rookie Tyrese Knight seemed like he was playing better and better and better. And so how long before Mike Macdonald, who kind of pushed for Tyrese Knight to be the Seahawks draft pick, how long before Tyrese Knight was going to get on the field? And instead, when I watched the tape, Corbin, I was very impressed by what number 17 was able to do. Now, he only had 3 tackles. He got the one fumble recovery, as you mentioned before, that K'Von Wallace punched out there. And even that, I mean, the ball was on the ground. I mean, Jerome Baker just jumped on it. I was impressed when I watched his run support. There were tackle opportunities that he basically created because of his physicality, because of his awareness. And so again, because he is a 6'2", 230-pound linebacker that does play very well in reverse, playing in coverage, something that former Seahawks linebackers maybe struggle with at times. I was very encouraged by what I saw from Jerome Baker. We talked about Tyrell Dodson before, but to me, that was one of the encouraging things. And I'll quickly transition here to a positional group that I think is going to be critical to the Seahawks in the future, and that's a tight end. Now, you know, at the tight end position, we've talked so much about Noah Fant. We talked about A.J. Barner, the rookie. Obviously, Pharaoh Brown was not available for the Seahawks in this particular game. Brady Russell saw as many snaps as a lead fullback as he did as a traditional tight end for the Seahawks. All of those players played fairly well for Seattle. At the same time, again, with only 2 catches, both by Noah Fant for a total of 11 yards, I think that it'd be easy to suggest that the Seahawks tight ends were not important in this victory against the Broncos. They were important. They were creating some run blocking opportunities, also pass protection. And Noah Fant continues to be a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of his blocking. There were some incredible plays in terms of his blocking, but also some where he gave up some pressure. A.J. Barner is actually the player that I want to talk about. You know, we talk so much about Byron Murphy, so much about Tyrese Knight, and some of Seattle's other rookies, Christian Haynes being another one. A.J. Barner actually, I thought, was actually Seattle's most impressive rookie in week 1. Look, with all due respect to the first-round pick, Byron Murphy, A.J. Barner was the only Seahawk, it seemed like, that was able to actually handle Jonathan Cooper, number 0 for the Broncos, who had 2 sacks, had tackle for loss. He was the Broncos' best defensive player, but not when 88 was blocking him. And so, again, I do think that tight end is going to be a critical position for the Seahawks, not necessarily because I think they're going to get that many receptions, but as Seattle kind of works through the injury issues that they're having at the right tackle position, watch out for Seattle to use their tight ends more as blockers rather than just as the pass catchers that they would be in maybe some of the previous Seattle offensive coordinators' systems.
You mentioned Jerome Baker. He was actually somebody that I was going to talk about in this segment, but you were so excited about it, I was going to give you that opportunity. The second pointer that I had down on defense, look, we talked about some of the other players in this defense being great fits in Mike Macdonald's scheme. Devin Witherspoon, I think Rick Woolen's a really good fit. I like Tyrell Dodson now with what we've seen. Jaron Reed. Look, I don't know that there is a player on this defense, though, in terms of maximizing his skill set, that is a more perfect fit for this scheme than Leonard Williams. And I knew he had a good game on Sunday, but when I went back and watched the All-22, and listen, those of you watching the show, this should not sound foreign by any means. I've said this several times. I usually watch the All-22 4 or 5 times through when I watch a game. Like, I watch every single play 4 or 5 times, and I take down notes. Leonard Williams just kept popping off of the screen, and he had 5 quarterback hits. Like, these were not just cheap shots either. Like, he had 5 legitimate hits on Bo Nix in the pocket. One of them was on Julian Love's interception. He blasted him. He led the team with 5 quarterback hits. he had a couple beautiful tackles, one of them at the line of scrimmage. I was making this reference on my social media today, Rob. He threw out a one-arm shiver on the guard and threw him to the ground. It almost looked like he was playing whack-a-mole with the way that he knocked the guy down to the ground. And then went down the line of scrimmage at 300-plus pounds and made the tackle on the other end of the line of scrimmage for no gain. Leonard Williams, with his ability to move up and down the line, to play big end, to play nose, to play three-tech, to even be a stand-up outside two-point stand if you want him to. Scheme really accentuates his strengths, and so that's how I'm going to cap this off. To me, he might be the best scheme fit of a player playing in this system to maximize his traits. And if it was any indication Sunday, you're going to get some really good numbers from Leonard Williams playing in Mike Macdonald's defense. When we come back, look, we'd love to continue talking about this win, but the show must go on. It is time to start looking towards week 2, the first road game of the season. The New England Patriots heading to Foxborough. What's new with the New England Patriots? It feels like everything. We're going to get to all of that coming up next year as we take our first look, the first peek at the New England Patriots here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends at FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. With a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Bet at everything from Geno Smith's MVP odds now at 11,000 to Byron Murphy II's Rookie of the Year odds at plus 1,400. And once Uchenna Nwosu returns, maybe comeback player of the year odds 25,000. Just throw in a $5 bet and you'll get a 3-week free trial to NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to the Locked On Seahawks podcast, Tuesday edition. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined on today's show by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s listening in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. It is on to week 2, and if that sounds familiar, I can't remember how many times Bill Belichick used to say that in his press conferences. It's on to the next opponent, or it's on to week 3. Well, you're not going to be hearing that from the coach on the other side. At least I don't expect that Gerard Mayo is going to be saying that in his press conference, the new coach for the New England Patriots. There is not a bigger change for New England heading into this season. It's just like Pete Carroll being replaced by Mike Macdonald, a iconic, the best coach in franchise history being replaced. Gerard Mayo, formerly playing for Bill Belichick, taking over this team that has a lot of new pieces on both sides of the ball. And there's some positive momentum coming out of there after beating the Cincinnati Bengals in week 1.
Stunning the Cincinnati Bengals, or at least stunned me. I'm not going to lie about that. There was 8 new head coaches in the NFL. 3 of them got victories in week 1. Gerard Mayo and Mike Macdonald, of course, being 2 of them. Jim Harbaugh, kind of probably some Seahawks fans have heard of that guy. He also had a victory, of course. But what's interesting to me, Corbin, is the way that Gerard Mayo and the New England Patriots were able to get that victory. 39 rushing attempts, only roughly half that in terms of passing attempts. They were trying to pound the ball against the Cincinnati Bengals. That's something that they obviously saw on tape was going to be a deficiency with Cincinnati. And I don't know that that's a deficiency with this current Seahawk team. Obviously, last year, we talked about it so many times, 31st in the NFL in rushing yards, rushing touchdowns allowed. That might be the recipe that the New England Patriots and Gerard Mayo as head coach try to duplicate. That is one of the very few holdovers of the Bill Belichick era, is their running back Ramondre Stevenson, who is a terrific player. But at the same time, I look at the rest of their team, and there has been an awful lot of change change. You mentioned just the fact that it's Bill Belichick to Gerard Mayo, the fact that it's Jacoby Brissett at the quarterback position. Maybe it's even going to be the rookie quarterback Drake May, their first-round selection. I don't think that's going to be the case now, considering the fact that, again, Jacoby Brissett helped the Patriots engineer that week 1 victory. Jalen Polk is a starting wide receiver for the Patriots. Of course, Ryan Grubb is going to know him to their time at the University of Washington. They're starting an offensive guard, Layden Robinson from Texas A&M at right guard. That is a change. They have another one of their draft picks who essentially is starting in K'Von Wallace at the tight end position. So again, this is a club that was starting 6 offensive linemen because they were trying to bludgeon the Cincinnati Bengals at the point of attack. So it's kind of old school, almost like Bill Belichick football. Run the ball down the opponent's throat. So it's what's new is old, what's old is new kind of effect in Foxborough.
Yeah, you mentioned a few of the additions, Jacoby Brissett being the most notable one. He is going to be starting a quarterback. They added KJ Osborne, formerly of the Vikings, a receiver that I've always thought was kind of an underrated player. Antonio Gibson gives them a nice change of pace, running back that they can put with DeMondre Stevenson. So they made some interesting additions, but when you look at the departures, Matt Judon, who to me is one of the most underrated defenders in the NFL, they traded Judon to the Falcons last month in training camp. And so he's no longer there. Mike Gesicki, their tight ends now in Cincinnati. Trent Brown, one of their tackles in Cincinnati. So they beat a couple of their former starters this past week with the Bengals. Mac Wilson, the linebacker, going to the Cardinals. It really is all about the youth movement for the New England Patriots here. And this is a team that's pretty darn healthy coming out of week 1. They've had a few guys that got banged up. And most notably, their starting defensive tackle is out with blood clots. So we're not going to be seeing him probably this season, unfortunately. But the New England Patriots have some intriguing young pieces. You mentioned Jalen Polk, who Washington fans are going to know very well from his time as one of the members of that three-headed monster in that receiving core with Rome Odunze and Jalen McMillan. He is already an impact player for this team. New England's added a couple of other pieces at the receiver and tight end positions. Defensively, I will say this is the thing that really surprised me. Man, maybe it shouldn't, because Gerard Mayo is a former linebacker in the NFL. He was a Pro Bowl, all-pro caliber linebacker for the New England Patriots, but their defense looked suffocating at times in that game against the Cincinnati Bengals on Sunday. I've already had a chance to look at that all 22, and they were flying all over the place. It looks like a fun defense that they are building over there in New England. And some of the carryover that they've had, but they also have a lot of new pieces there they brought in through the draft, through free agency, that they are starting to piece together, kind of like the Seahawks have done with some of their free agent additions and some of their rookie additions they've had. And so certainly this is a team that, look, it's just been 1 week. New England could still struggle a lot this year, but we are seeing the value of good coaching. And I think Gerard Mayo is a rising star in the coaching profession, a guy that was a coach on the field for Bill Belichick. And I think you're seeing players buy in very similarly to how they're buying into Mike Macdonald, which makes this a dangerous team. Anytime you have a team that's bought in the NFL and you got a coach that's respected, that is a team that is going to be difficult to put away.
No question about it. And of course, this is a home game for the Patriots, and Gerard Mayo is going to be looking to, kind of just stamp his place in Foxborough. Again, all due respect to the victory that they had against the Cincinnati Bengals, similar to the Seahawks when they're facing a rookie quarterback in Bo Nix. I think that Mike Macdonald had, I don't want to say a layup because he had to earn that victory, but still, there was no question that Sean Payton, I think limited the amount of downfield passing that he was expecting his rookie quarterback to attempt against the Seahawks, and that made it easier to game plan. I think if the New England Patriots continue to have the run-heavy approach that they have on the offense, look, they have a good offensive coordinator, Alex Van Pelt, somebody who previously had a running quarterback with with Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. Very different offense here with the New England Patriots, where they're going to be featuring their running back. But still, the Cincinnati Bengals were a team that did have a little bit of one hand kind of tied behind their back. Jamar Chase was not necessarily expected to play. He was kind of playing with a little bit of a holdout situation there. T. Higgins was not on the field for the Bengals. Joe Mixon, their previously star running back, no longer is with the Bengals. So I feel like the Patriots, who scored 16 total points, the lowest amount of points of any victorious team in week one, this is an opponent that if the Seahawks can just kind of continue their positive momentum, I really do believe that this is a game that they should be able to go on the road and eke out a victory here as well.
I'm really looking forward to diving into the matchups because this is not Tom Brady's Patriots. This is not Bill Belichick's Patriots. There's going to be a lot of new faces that we are going to be talking about here. And obviously, a lot of changes since they played in 2020. That exciting game that we got to see DK Metcalf going against Stephon Gilmore in the prime of his career. That was an exciting one. But a lot of changes for the New England Patriots. Cam Newton isn't playing quarterback anymore like he was then. It's been 4 years. Both rosters look a lot different. So really looking forward to diving into the key matchups. And that'll be coming up on tomorrow's episode. As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Again, coming up tomorrow, it's our favorite episode of the week, Matchup Wednesday. It'll be coming up, and we'll be diving into all those key positional battles to watch when the Seahawks hit the road for the first time on the East Coast. They'll be heading over to Foxborough. Seahawks Patriots key matchups we'll be diving in tomorrow. Make sure you're listening in and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday night. Go Hawks.